What's good, everybody? Welcome back to another episode of Urban Platform, man. It's a live edition. Let me see what I got going on here. I'm ready to do a sound check real quick, just to make sure my sound is I'm good with the sound. Okay, all right, yeah. I wanted to come in, man, and do a quick live show to talk about the WNBA, Caitlin Clark. I said even before Caitlin Clark was drafted to the WNBA and she was playing, I think this was like her senior year. She was going into her senior year. Uh, and people was looking forward to her coming out of college and going to the WNBA. And I was kind of skeptical about the kind of like support that the WNBA was going to get as far as like would they allow her to grow in the WNBA and allow the WNBA to grow, because even before Caitlin Clark got to the WNBA, it wasn't a new league. The WNBA has been around since I think what 97, 96, 97, somewhere around there, So and they have had some really good basketball players come through, and they still you weren't wasn't able the league still wasn't able to grow, right? And I told people that it was by design. Like the WNBA was not allowed to grow, and that was by design. Um, because when you think about it, the WNBA, like when they first started, I think it was the Houston Comets won the first 4 WNBA championships, right? You had Cynthia Cooper, Tina Thompson, Cheryl Swoops, and some, and some other really good basketball players on that team. And they won the first 4 championships. And there was a lot of buzz around the WNBA at that time with the Houston Comets. But it kind of faded off, and the NBA or the WNBA didn't do anything to promote it. As a matter of fact, they started showing the games like on a Lifetime channel, and they wasn't really, they didn't put them on like any of the big networks. And so when they did that, a lot of people just stopped watching the WNBA because it wasn't getting promoted like people wanted them to, or people thought that they should. And so, out of sight, out of mind, and they kind of put them on the back shelf. And I thought at that time, if they wanted the WNBA to grow, then, they would have promoted it then. And so even when you look at the history of the WNBA, they never really wanted the WNBA to grow. It's always been about the NBA, because you can't really separate the fan bases, right? Like people who like basketball, if you like NBA basketball, those fans that's the same fan base. Like take myself for instance, like I like basketball in general, right? So if I'm watching the NBA play and I'm watching NBA playoffs and all this other stuff that go along with the NBA, they wouldn't. I'm not considered a new customer, or a, you know what I mean? I'm not like people who like basketball in general. That's not considered like tapping into a new market, So why should they allow the WNBA to grow when it's not a new market? It's like the same fan base. And people say, well, Caitlin Clark, she comes with her own fan base, right? And her own followers, which is true. Because at Iowa State, she had a large following, and I'm sure that following, those people followed her to the WNBA, and they support her in the WNBA. But again, I don't know if the NBA or the WNBA looks at that as a new following, because when you think about college basketball, you think about the big programs. You think about UConn, South Carolina, UCLA, Notre Dame. All of those colleges have their own individual fan base, right? And so those colleges, they get the support from those fan bases financially, and all that stuff, which is separate from the WNBA. That is a whole separate market. But when you try to transfer that to the NBA market, it don't really, it really don't cause people to the league to grow, because like I said, that fan base is already a part of that. Those people are already being marketed to by Gatorade, State Farm, Nike. Like, they already have that fan base, so they don't need to, like, that's not like tapping into a new market. Like, say for instance, like with Tiger Woods, before Tiger Woods, like, most black people really didn't pay a whole lot of attention to golf, because golf is a sport that is it's a sport where you have to invest a lot of, you have to invest money to get better at golf. You have to have access to good golf clubs. You have to have access to training. You have to have access to the golf courses and stuff like that, right? So most black people really wasn't paying golf too much attention. But now you have Tiger Woods coming into golf, and then Tiger Woods attract black people to golf and minorities. So what that means, that's a new market that they haven't really, like, golf hasn't tapped into, that African American or the minority market, right? And so that's considered a new market, right? And so a college athlete going from college to the pro is not really considered like a new demographic or a new market. So it really don't matter to the WNBA, in my opinion. And you can see the way that they have treated WNBA basketball over the years. It really don't matter if the WNBA grow or not, because they don't have, they don't really have anything to gain from that. So now I was listening to, what's the guy named Jason Whitlock, and it's a lot of talk going on. People are saying that a lot of the conversation is about, like, is Caitlin Clark losing her appeal? They that's one of the topics that's going on. Then they're talking about Caitlin Clark as far as, like, people people around the league hating on Caitlin Clark and all that stuff, right? And that's cool and everything, but I think it's just a distraction. You know, it's a distraction. Like, for instance, like, if you had somebody at your job who didn't like you because, for whatever reason, and they're one of your coworkers, or your, a peer of yours, like, how your peers feel about you is not going to determine, like, if you have success or not in that job. That's so it may become an annoyance, if somebody just, they don't get along with you or anything. But that can't determine, like, how far you go up in the company. It can't determine, like, how much success you have in the company, because they don't have any authority, right? So when reports come out that Raven Johnson didn't give Caitlin Clark a high five, I don't know, I don't know if that was true or not. If Raven Johnson is holding, like, some animosity or something against Caitlin Clark, she didn't want to shake her hand, or if she didn't want to give her a high five after practice. I mean, I think it's just a non-issue, and it wouldn't affect, in my opinion, it wouldn't affect, like, how much success Caitlin Clark was able to have in the league. Because Caitlin Clark is still going to put up her 500 to 1,000, jump shots. She's still going to work out, do her 2 a days and stuff like that. So if Raven Johnson was hating on her, which I don't know, it don't matter, because she can't stop that. She can't stop Caitlin Clark's growth. But who can stop the growth of Caitlin Clark in the WNBA is the powers that be, right? They can put the WNBA in a position where they know that they're not going to grow, and they're not going to be able to flourish. She's going to get her money and everything, but I just don't think that the NBA, and I've been telling people this for years, the NBA is interested in seeing the WNBA grow. They just not interested in that, because the pie is a certain size, and now that you have women, like, women who are demanding money, it's like you have to divide that pie into more pieces, right? So let me I'm gonna play some of what's the guy name? Jason Whitlock says, and I want you to listen to what he says, and I'm gonna give some just a different perspective on what Jason Whitlock said about Caitlin Clark and the WNBA.
Have you heard the news? The Indiana Fever, the WNBA, they're struggling to sell out the Indiana Fever's first home game of the season. They're struggling to sell tickets for Caitlin Clark. That's not a good omen. That's a sign that the WNBA is about to potentially crash and burn, that they've probably already burned up the goodwill that Caitlin Clark earned them by entering into the league. If they've diminished the star of Caitlin Clark, what they've really diminished is the entire league.
You done messed up.
All right, so let me stop it right there, right? So, like I said, the WNBA, in my opinion, they don't really have anything to lose. Like if Caitlin Clark is not successful in the WNBA, like the fan base, the sponsors, they're not really losing out because they are reaching them and they're getting it, they are into them from men's basketball and other ways, right? So that State Farm's still gonna market to them. Men's, they're gonna sell Nikes and all this other stuff because it's not like women's basketball is just bringing a whole new demographic of fans. And even they say women really don't even support the WNBA like men do, right? And it's the WNBA fan base probably is a whole bunch of men who just like basketball and sports in general. So we're not considered, or they're not considered a new demographic. I can agree with Jason Whitlock when he says that maybe the fan base, like Caitlin Clark fan base, may be getting tired of some of the drama surrounding. They just want to see, her play basketball and see her have the type of success that they think that she can have, right? So maybe that's kind of discouraging to that fan base. That could be part of why ticket sales are not up. Well, let me let Jason Whitlock finish here.
Hey, Ron.
And here's what's critical. With this new CBA agreement, with many of these players, or enough of these players, earning 7-figure salaries, high 6-figure salaries, being treated like they're actually generating revenue and running a profitable business, they're no longer going to get the benefit of the doubt. Women's basketball has always been given the benefit of the doubt. I'm not talking about from the NBA that finances the league. I'm talking about from fans like me and you.
Look at us. Hey, look at us.
Look at us. Huh? Who would have thought?
Not me.
Those of us, yeah.
I think most fans, like I said, and I'm a diehard basketball fan, right? I've been watching the WNBA basketball since the beginning, since the Houston Comets, and I don't know if I feel like like if they're being given the benefit of the doubt. I just think that they're just not getting promoted the same way that the NBA is getting promoted. Like should they be promoted the same way? I don't know. It just depends on who you ask. But just think about it. When you think about like women's basketball, even going back to 1992, like the men's, like the Dream Team with everybody who played on the Dream Team, right? The primary, like the big responsibility for the Dream Team was to promote NBA basketball, professional basketball all over the world. Michael Jordan, Larry Bird, Magic Johnson, Dave Robinson, and all those guys. They promoted NBA basketball all around the world. But the WNBA basketball, professional women, now the WNBA wasn't around then, right? But the women's basketball team, the Olympic basketball team, they weren't used to promote the game, and so like even if you go online and you look at, you say 92 Dream Team, right? immediately, you're going to get a whole bunch of pictures and a whole bunch of information about, the 92 Dream Team basketball. But you don't find a whole lot of information about the women who play in the 92 Olympics. This right here, let me see. I found this and it said the last time U.S. women's basketball lost in Olympics, right? And that's 92 when the women's lost, right? So you don't find a whole lot of it. And that just proves to me that they were an afterthought. Like the women were an afterthought, and people didn't really, they weren't used to promote the game. So if they wasn't used to promote the game, then that means that people didn't really care about the future of women's basketball. It was like an afterthought, or like they was like, who cares? So you fast forward to now in the league, and you have and you have always had some really good female basketball players in the league, but they just never promoted them. They never wanted the WNBA to grow. And what happened was with Caitlin Clark and the amount of attention that she has drawn when she was at Iowa and the big, that was cool, but the WNBA, like, they didn't care. The NBA, they don't care. They like the WNBA being, some people say, like, it's like a welfare league, right? And the NBA likes to be in a position where as though they are subsidizing the WNBA, because as long as the NBA is subsidizing the WNBA, then they can, they can kind of keep the lid on, like, how much they grow and how far, the WNBA is allowed to progress. If you think about the salaries and stuff in the WNBA, you think about, like, well, I think at first they were getting like 9% revenue share, right? And across all professional sports, 9% that's the lowest. When you take into account all the major sports, all the major men's sports, baseball, basketball, football, then you put hockey in there, like women's sports, their revenue sharing was like the lowest of everything at 9%. And I think now, I'm not sure what they went up to right now. I think it's 35% or something, or they wanted 35%. Either way, it's not what they would want it to be, and it's not even close to what the men get, right, still. And so the fan base, in my opinion, they just really, I think they're distracted, because you don't want to, the fan base is distracted, in my opinion, because they don't, the enemy is not her peers in the league. The enemy is the NBA, and the enemy is the WNBA. They don't want the league to grow. It'll make a certain amount of money, and a few players around the league will get paid, but it'll never have the same. It won't. They will never have the same prestige as the men's league, and that's because they don't want them to do that. So even when I look at like other professional women's sports, like when you look at tennis, the reason why those tennis players get a lot of money is because those tournaments and stuff that they participate in are like, they are in like different countries. Like those tournaments are all around the world. So if you're a professional women's tennis player, you can get, and you make it to the top, you'll make a lot of money, right? But if you make it to the top, as far as American sports is concerned, like basketball, those women, they just not going to allow them. It's almost like a glass ceiling for women's sports in this country. They're not going to really allow you to make that kind of money. And I think the distraction comes when they say, well, this player is jealous of Caitlin Clark, or this this player don't like Caitlin Clark, and that could be very well true. But it didn't, like Larry Bird faced jealousy, and he was not. It didn't stop him, right? Because Larry Bird's success and Magic Johnson's success was tied to the success of the league, right? Whereas though it's not like that for women's basketball or Caitlin Clark. So that's the difference in that, right? I mean, you think about like even Tiger Woods, like I said with Tiger Woods, once they realized that Tiger Woods was as good as he was, and that everybody was going to be able to benefit from Tiger Woods' presence, it didn't matter like if any of Tiger Woods' peers didn't like him, it didn't matter. That's one they wasn't going to be able to discriminate against Tiger Woods and stop him because Tiger Woods was good for the growth of tennis overall, right? Because like I say, he taps into a whole new demographic, a whole new market for tennis. And that helped, it benefited everybody. But this country, like when it comes to women, that's just a whole nother it's just a whole nother discussion when it comes to women. Let me see. Yeah, it's just a whole nother discussion when it comes to women as far as being able to generate the kind of money that they think that they should be able to generate. But let me and I think part of what Jason Whitlock said, I just think it's just a big distraction. But let me get back to what Jason Whitlock is saying.
It's bad basketball, but they're not being paid that much. Well, now that Aaliyah Boston's making 7 figures, Asia Wilson's making 7 figures, and several of these other players are making 7 figures, no benefit of the doubt anymore. People are going to want their money's worth, and the WNBA can't give it to them.
Not with my money.
And when you don't feel good about the players, when these players are walking around making 7-figure salaries, pretending like they're superstar celebrities, pretending like they're just the same as NBA players, all the goodwill is going to disappear. It's going to evaporate. We already see it in Indiana with Caitlin Clark. The goodwill is gone. Hey, we're part of a movement and women's basketball is on the rise. No, women's basketball in the WNBA and professionals, it's bloated. It's overrated. It's hot garbage that's being paid like it's pristine and some prized possession, and we're seeing some form of basketball that we can't get anyplace else. Well, you can get it at your local junior high for free.
So I don't agree with Jason Whitlock there, about his comments about women's basketball. I think, like I said, always been a lot of really good WNBA basketball players in the league, right? But let me read some of the comments though, like what some of the fans in the chat are saying, right? Let me see. I'm still a fan of Caitlin Clark's talent. So for me, her star power hasn't diminished, and which I think is good. Let me see. This league is subsidized cultural organization, not sports league, right? And that's one thing too that I think it's another distraction in my opinion. Like just play basketball sometimes, like sometimes there's a distraction when you have so many different social causes connected to the sport. Let me see. This fan right here says that a few years ago, people didn't even want free tickets, and that could be true, So yeah, that's part of it. Let me see. The WNBA was determined to strangle their golden goose, and it appears they are likely to succeed. And so, like I said, they never won it. Like even if Caitlin Clark was to, nothing she can do that will convince the powers to be to allow this league to grow, right? And so anytime she don't have any success, or they get to, they get to put articles like what Jason Whitlock is saying about the league not growing, ticket sales, they don't really mind that type of publicity because they won't be the NBA and the WNBA league officials won't be the scapegoat. It'll be, they can blame it on like jealous, peers of hers. They could blame it on racism. They can blame it on anything, but it won't look like the WNBA, in my opinion, did anything to sabotage, to sabotage the growth of Caitlin Clark and the growth of the league. Let me see. Okay, so and this fan right here said it's called a boycott because of fever management, right? So even if Caitlin Clark fans are boycotting the league, I don't see how that helped, to boycott. I don't see how that helps the league and anything. But yeah, let me see. Yep, the ship has sailed. I got real interested in the fever when Caitlin Clark burst onto the scene, but they showed their ass with the way they ganged up on Caitlin Clark, cheap shots, the horrible refereeing. I'm done. So that right there is a fan that is a fan that's not pleased with how, like, the treatment of Caitlin Clark, and also, like I said, the league not really supporting and backing the success of a player that's like a major draw in the league. So that's let me see. I'm just a fan. They called us racist. Me no more. Let me see. Me no more dollars with the W. So this guy said, or this person said they're not going to spend no more money with the WNBA. Yeah. Let me see. Who else? Let me see. So, and this person right here agreed with Jason Whitlock. They said, yep, you are point on. They ruined their opportunity by showing everyone how bad the league is when they mistreated the fans' favorite Caitlin Clark with bullying, bad coaching, and refereeing. Right. And so, again, if it was in the WNBA's best interest and they wanted to grow, they would have did the same thing they did with like Magic and Bird and Mike and all those guys. Like, after a while, they had to legislate some of those hard fouls out of the NBA, like when Kurt Rambis got fouled, by I think Kevin McHale fouled Kurt Rambis, like you just clotheslined him and took him to the floor to prevent Kurt Rambis from scoring. Eventually the NBA, because it wasn't good for the league, right? So they legislated that kind of stuff out of there. Then when you had a situation like with the way the Detroit Pistons was beating up on Michael Jordan, right? The league, they got stricter with that stuff. And then so you couldn't beat Michael Jordan up the way that you was, that the Detroit Pistons was. So now fast forward to Caitlin Clark. Caitlin Clark, she can get pushed in the back and it's just like the league is not doing anything to protect her the same way they protected stars in other sports. So, and that's because they don't care about the growth of the league. Let me see what Jason Whitlock is
saying. You can get it at your local church league.
I come to the church, look what I'm telling you. I got jumped all on my back, and we gonna tell me.
So Jason Whitlock is just saying that.
League.
Shoot down at the bar. Bitch,
you think people want to pay for a group of players that hate them and hate America and have portrayed themselves as victims and blackmailed and guilt tripped their way into a 7-figure salary?
If y'all don't give us what we want, like, we sit out.
If you can't sell out the Indiana Fevers first home game, and you're basically having to reduce prices, give tickets away to see Caitlin Clark. That is an indicator. Not just that Caitlin Clark has lost her star power, it's an indicator that the entire league is teetering at the brink of an uprising and a backlash that's really long overdue.
It's about damn time.
Yeah, man. I just want to know, like, what do y'all think, man? Do y'all think that the WNBA? I don't find anything wrong with the quality of basketball in the WNBA. So right there, I disagree with Jason Whitlock, right? But it's just that I just think that the fans are distracted and the anger is kind of misplaced. I think if they should be angry at the people who run the NBA and the people who run the WNBA for not allowing the league to grow, and that's basically my thoughts on it. But I do want to know, like, what do y'all think about it? Do you think that eventually they're going to make Caitlin Clark like the scapegoat? Like, she couldn't save the WNBA, or are they going to make the people who are hating on Caitlin Clark, like, are they going to make them scapegoats, and say that, well, the league didn't survive because there was too much hate in the league? When, like I said, if it was important enough for this league to be able to grow, then a lot of, there's nothing that Kennedy Carter or
hear that loud?
Or Kennedy Carter or anybody in the WNBA could do to stop this league from growing, because they're not going to allow you to sink their ship. So it's just that the WNBA and the NBA didn't want to grow. They put a cap on how much attention. They've been doing this from day one. Like, they put a cap on how much, how far they wanted this league to go. But they can use players around the league as scapegoats, saying, just like Jason Whitlock saying that, well, these players hate their fans. And there have been some instances where sometimes these, what was a young lady named Kelsey Plum? She said something about a fan wanting an autograph from her one time, and other things that. But I don't know if that's all by design to make the WNBA players look a certain way, and have a certain image in public. So when the league don't have the kind of success, then that's the main thing that people will focus on, is like what some of the WNBA players have said and how they've acted in certain situations, and so they can focus on that. But I just think the anger is misplaced. So that's my take on it. Let me know what y'all think about it. And don't forget to like and subscribe to the channel. And with that being said, man, I'm going to check y'all out in the next video. Peace.